give about 1 more minute and then we can get started. Jose, I don't know if you're in here, but if you could send that attendance form in the chat, that would be great. Perfect, thank you. Okay, we can go ahead and get started. So thank you everyone for coming, both students and panelists. Thank you for being vulnerable in your own homes and being here to support oSTEM at UCF and the overall mission of oSTEM. We really appreciate it. And yeah, I think you'll probably get another email after us that we'll be thanking you graciously again. But thank you all for being here. I'm going to go ahead and announce our panelists and give you a little background into who these amazing people are and the amazing things that they do and have done. So we'll go ahead and get started. We'll start with LJ. LJ is a UCF alumni working as an industrial engineer in defense manufacturing at Lockheed Martin. He's been able to work with Lockheed Martin for about 9 years, starting as a UCF CWEP student. Throughout his career, he's gone into work cost control and as a factory floor industrial engineer. Things that LJ likes to do for fun is going to the gym, running, hiking, traveling, cooking, and going out to eat. Next, we have Malcolm Lewis, he, she, they. Malcolm is a queer engineer and an occasional drag queen. Malcolm is a market data analyst at Bloomberg and a recent graduate from New York University's School of Engineering, where they were the president of oSTEM at NYU. As part of a fiercely amazing group of queer students who consistently challenge the status quo. Next, we'll move on to Jeff Verstyko. Is that correct? Perfect. Jeff is in his 3rd year as president of Come Out with Pride Orlando, which will be celebrated a little differently next month on October 10th. He is also leading a bid to hopefully bring World Pride to Central Florida in 2026. This would mark the 10 years after Pulse and continue to bring the love and support still needed in the Orlando community. Earlier this year, thanks to the pandemic, he started his own graphic and web design agency and hopes to continue working on innovative and exciting projects. In his spare time, he volunteers with other nonprofits such as Interpride, as well as the One Orlando Alliance. Since 2015, Jeff, alongside his husband David, have a bunch of furry babies, 2 dogs and 2 cats, and proudly call Orlando their home. Moving on to Simone Novice-Card. I think I pronounced that right. Did I? Awesome. She, hers, is a UCF alum as well, PhD in chemistry in 2013, who has been working as a research and development chemist for Agilent Technologies for the past 6 years. Her work is engineering adjacent and focuses on the design and testing of new gas that word is, let me tell you, fancy. I can't even pronounce it. So fancy. What is
You're
it?
You're good though, chromatography. Yeah, you pretty much had it the first time.
Yes. I obviously am engineering, so not in that ballpark there. She is out of work in her professional circles and is a member of the NOGLSTP, as well as being the current secretary of the Del Mar Peninsula section of the Society of Women Engineers. Moving on to Dr. Leonard Bennett. He is a director of medical outcomes science liaison at EDM Sorenzo, a business unit of Merck AGA in Germany. In his role, he serves as the primary point of contact for both clinical and health economics and outcomes research for national payers, integrated health networks, and government accounts to support products in immuno-oncology and neurology. Dr. Bennett has worked in the pharmaceutical industry since 1998 and has received numerous awards in his roles, including the 2016 Global Field Medical Award from Novo Nordisk. Dr. Bennett has graduated from Mercer University College of Pharmacy in 1989 and currently sits on the Board of Visitors at the College of Pharmacy and has recently fulfilled a 3-year position on the Alumni Board of Directors. Thank you all for attending. We really appreciate having you here. You are all amazing and have done some crazy, amazing things. So we really appreciate you being here and talking with us about our students. Is there anything that any of y'all would like to say or input? This is your time now. Whatever you want. This is your little.
Is it about us or just in general?
Just in general, if you want to say anything to the students real quick before we go into questions, whatever.
Okay.
We can also do that again at the end if you have anything to leave your final remarks too.
Gotcha. I would just say this is awesome that you have this kind of resource nowadays. I kind of wish I had it back in my day. I'm going to age myself, but I graduated back in 2012. Different times, crazy to think, but glad to be part of this event to be able to help others out.
Yeah, I was gonna say hi. Thank you everyone for inviting me. I was gonna say into your school, but I'm not there. But thank you for inviting me to your space. And thanks, Sean, so much for reaching out to me and asking me to be a part of this. That is so dope, and I'm so excited to be here.
Yes, thank you, Malcolm, for being here. We love you. Okay, anything else? If not, I'll move into the question. Okay, so students attending, we have a set list of questions that we're going to ask our panelists. Many of y'all probably will ask some of these questions, and then after those questions are asked, if time allows, which we've kind of planned the meeting a little bit longer today than normal, you will all have the opportunity to ask questions. If something comes into your head in the middle of the meeting or while they're still answering their questions, feel free to just put it in the chat. All of our questions tonight from the audience will go into the chat and will be read by our amazing vice president, just so we can filter any of those questions and go about that in the right way. But feel free to put it in there whenever. That way it doesn't lose from your mind. So we'll begin with the first question. What does diversity mean to each of y'all? Feel free to go with any order or whoever wants to reply.
I'll start. So, I'm echoing, I guess. So anyway, so I think for me, diversity means being able to be unique and be true to yourself. No matter who you are or what your background or socioeconomic status is or age or, sexual orientation or religion or any of that. It's just truly being you and being able to own who you are and be proud and accept who you are and show people that you as a person are a true human.
Thank you.
I really liked Leonard's answer. I think that a big part of it is the diversity of viewpoints that you get when you have people with different backgrounds on a team or in whatever organization. I mean, you have different lived experiences as people, even if you have something in common, say even within oSTEM or something, everyone is going to have a different lived experience, even though, you are with or adjacent to or part of the LGBTQ plus community. And so I think representing that is what diversity is to me.
I'd like to kind of bounce off on that because similar to what I was going to say. For me, diversity is all about respecting each other's differences. I mean, it's not just what's on the outside, but like she said, diversity of thoughts and viewpoints. I think we're getting better at respecting, each other in certain respects, but sometimes when it comes to things like religious beliefs or political differences, it feels like we're getting further and further apart. It's almost kind of like a sports team where you've got team A versus team B, and each side is fighting each other. And I think that's kind of leading to something that I've seen over the last couple of years, this cancel culture that I think is really, really harmful to our society. It's sometimes necessary, don't get me wrong. Sometimes things get really toxic and it's, but I think it's a method of last resort. And I think, you've got people who are deleting friends on Facebook, which for all the young people is a social network that us old people still use. But if you're deleting people from your life, is that really helping us? I mean, if our goal is to try and educate one another, that removing people from that just reinforces our own echo chambers. It's kind of like mental segregation.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Go ahead.
That's okay.
I was going to add regarding social media, there's some people that are probably on the other spectrum of my beliefs and stuff, but I keep them on there because I kind of try to see their perspective on how current events are going when I actually ever go on to Facebook and stuff. So it's interesting, like, where are they kind of coming from whenever current events are happening? So just to add on to that.
Yeah, I think those are both two really interesting points. Diversity to me in my head, well, first and foremost, just to me, it sounds interesting, way better than I think what is the norm or what used to be the norm, which was creating this very homogenous culture where everyone was the same and everyone thought the same, which is growth. It's I need a little bit of flavor, but also I wrote it down. I write things down because my memory is always popping off. So what I wrote in response to that question was the first few things that came to mind was authenticity, and more specifically, kind of a freedom to be authentic without fear of prosecution or anything like that, or without having without feeling the need to defend your existence. If that makes sense. I mean, I think a diverse environment kind of creates a platform where you can freely express yourself without feeling oh, I'm going to have to, explain myself. If that makes sense.
Yeah, definitely agree. Thank you all for answering and sharing your viewpoints on that. Diversity is definitely something that it is in today's conversation, which I think leads us into our second question, which really kind of takes diversity a step further and asks, what's the difference between diversity and inclusion?
To me, I feel like diversity is sort of, you have the people there, and so they could give some kind of input. And then inclusion is actually seeking out that input and incorporating it at that same level of importance that you would give somebody who had a majority opinion. Because say, I can exist on a team of otherwise homogenous people, and that's diversity. But if you don't listen to me, it's not inclusion.
Right, with regards to the inclusion piece, especially for those more introverted during group discussion or brainstorming, trying to kind of bring them into the group discussion, get their input, whether it's them speaking up or taking them during a break and taking them aside, trying to, hey, what are your thoughts on this? And then bring that up, because sometimes it's a little overwhelming in those kind of situations. So, yeah.
I think, sorry, Jeff, go ahead. Or Leonardo, I'm sorry.
No, I guess for me, I think inclusion is, being able to find the commonalities among the group and being able to also accept the differences and still have uniformity and achieving an objective, whatever it may be.
I was going to say, diversity sometimes exists by default, but inclusion is something you actively have to work towards. And I just want to take a moment, talk about my personal life. I grew up in a not very diverse environments through school and even into college. So when I got to college, and there was a position that was created for vice president of diversity at the college. I went to RIT in New York. It was kind of like, do we need this? I mean, there's diversity everywhere. What's the point of having that thing? But the goal is, it's not just pointing out that diversity exists, but is trying to have that inclusive environment that leads to so many positive, experiences. And, sometimes I think, we talk in theory, but one real practical experience that I had this past year, I was involved with the Global Pride event that happened back in June, the big virtual Pride celebration. And so by default, we had people and speakers and performers from all over the world. So that was there. But to actually make all that happen, we needed a really inclusive group of volunteers, people who represented different viewpoints from, cultures around the world. We had people, who were representing the deaf community and all these things that you don't necessarily think of because that's not your area. But when you have all those people at the table in the same room talking to each other, you learn so much, and it really makes for more powerful end results.
Jeff, that leads perfectly into what I was going to say. I mean, literally perfectly. I was going to say, someone gave me a really good analogy, and the analogy was the difference between like diversity and inclusion is diversity is you invite a bunch of different people who are different from you to the party. But inclusion is having a bunch of different people different from your mindset, part of the planning committee, if that makes sense. And literally, Jeff, you describing virtual global pride in the way that it was created is literally the definition of inviting people not just to the party, but to the planning committee as well. So yeah, that's I mean, and it's just like, I feel like a lot of people get confused with what diversity and inclusion is. People confuse them for each other. And I think the more important idea is like, what are we doing now and how do we push the envelope further? And I think a lot of people stop at, what diversity is or what they think it is, and they don't go beyond and go a little deeper.
Yeah, that's great. And I think that kind of how y'all were talking about, asking someone to go to be a part of the planning committee or really shows the difference between the diversity and the conclusion or inclusion. And then I think that kind of also kind of leads into the next question along with inclusion. I'm going to skip a question here and go back to it if y'all are following along. But in the industry that each of y'all have worked in or have been a part of, what do you think your industry that you all each from pretty much different industries, what do you think your industry could do to make, a more inclusive culture within the workforce that you all are a part of?
So I should preface, I literally just graduated last year, and so I should explain. So I went to NYU for computer science and then graduated, and I went into the field of data engineering for a little bit at IBM, and then I went to Bloomberg for market data analyst. It's really interesting to see how I think tech in general is fairly good at being diverse, but whatever that means. But there are two things that I noticed at both companies I work at now that kind of maybe speaks to the culture and how not as progressive as it could be. It's not as progressive as it could be. So with Bloomberg, they just make it a little bit harder for one of the organizations called Be Proud to kind of do the work that they want to. And I remember having a conversation before working at the company, and I was talking to one of the creators of Be Proud, and he was talking to me about oSTEM at NYU, and we were exchanging ideas and having a conversation, and he was explaining to me how difficult it was to kind of get real basic things like, what's a good example? Swag, like Bloomberg designated swag, but but make it gay with like rainbows and stuff. And then with IBM, I think the company is the company is really good with, I think, giving representation to especially the queer community. Like the float that they had 2 years ago in the city in New York was incredible. But there's still pockets of, I was going to say regression. I was like, who am I, an engineer? There are pockets of I think people who are still, regress into this mentality of I don't know where they're from, but I feel like one of my team leads didn't really care about inclusion, didn't really care about anything outside of their work. And that makes sense. You're very focused at work. But for me to really be focused at my job, I need to be able to bring myself and not have to kind of, segregate myself and leave part of me at home. I don't know if that made sense, but yeah.
My career has been pretty much at the intersection of the theme park and technology industries. I've been part of that since I graduated back in the LJ. I know you said you dated yourself with 2012. I graduated 10 years before that, so dated myself even more. You know, those have been my two industries that I've been working in. Theme parks historically have been fairly with good report cards. But tech, you know, while they're certainly diverse, I don't think inclusivity is necessarily, they get high marks for that all the time. And if you look at a lot of companies, you know, if you look at their boards, if you look at some of their upper management, you see the same thing. And there, it lacks diversity. You have a lot of straight white old guys, and that mentality is, you know, typically pervasive, and it doesn't necessarily lead to the really positive change that's needed. So, you know, the more that those people at that level can become more diverse and bring forth change, I mean, you need to have leadership at the top who says we are welcoming, we welcome diversity, we welcome inclusion. You have to have HR departments that are setting up policies, that are making sure that employees have continuing education, and hopefully things like even just social events for employees to get together and interact with each other, whereas, you know, they may not in their everyday activities. So all those things put together, I think, is really kind of the recipe for leading to a better and more inclusive and work environment.
So I think for me, I work in the pharmaceutical industry, which I think has been very progressive in diversity. I know for us, for instance, this year during the month of Pride, the company changed its logo to the rainbow color on all of our emails. So I thought that was really cool. But we also have a Rainbow Network, which is a group for LGBTQ and those who support LGBTQ employees. But, you know, I also know that a lot of pharmaceutical companies are very generous in supporting events such as Pride events throughout the nation and supporting that their employees attend and will pay for us to go to certain Pride events and sponsor. So, you know, and also we're one of the first to do domestic partner benefits as an industry. So, you know, I just think I'm very blessed to be in an industry that's been very supportive of the gay employees.
I think a lot of that, like, really companies, if they want to support people well, you know, for any kind of diversity, they've got to put their money where their mouth is in terms of hiring and retention and benefits, like those three things. Because in hiring, it's like you need to hire from a diverse pool. Something that happens in my field a lot in chemistry is there'll be like a specific thing. Yes, you're smiling, I see you. But you know, there will be a specific thing that they want skills in, say chromatography. There aren't a lot of people who do it, so you find the same research groups represented all the time. How do you break out of that? How do you get out of that? So reaching out to groups like oSTEM, like Society of Women Engineers, like NOGLSEP, which is Science and Technology Professionals, the National Organization of Lesbian and Gay Scientists and Technical Professionals. Got it. So reaching out to these organizations, reaching out specifically, say like to HBCUs, because we need all the diversity, reaching out to the National Hispanic Engineers Association, things like that, when you're doing your hiring. And then after you've done the hiring, what are you doing actually to retain these people? And that's where kind of affinity groups, you know, the way that Leonard had mentioned, come in, where you've got a group, you know, that is a support type group, you know, for a given demographic, and making that something that is a good thing, and, you know, like not you have to go do this because you're being punished, you know, for the other people in the company. Make it something fun and something that they're going to want to be involved in. And then in terms of benefits, you have to be willing to actually give benefits that are going to make people want to stay. So before marriage equality, it was domestic partner benefits. You know, now something that would be important for a lot of people would be support for transition. That's something that my company actually has started supporting as a benefit, and I hope that that's something that really becomes more prevalent.
That's so cool. I just wanted to drop. That's so dope that your company offers that.
I agree. I was super happy to hear that.
Yeah, I'll make this comment. I think it was funny because at the last Rainbow Network meeting, I think we were at like a company a whole company meeting, and the number of people that actually came to this meeting, just people who were supportive of gay and lesbian, transgender people, was probably 3 times the number of actually gay people there, because they all think our get-togethers are so cool and fun. So it's like everybody wants to be part of this organization because we throw the best get-togethers, I guess.
Yes, everyone wants to be down until they don't want to be down, and I've seen that's so real. Just to add on, Simone, I realized you made a great point, and I realized I didn't fully address the question. The things that my industry could probably do better is literally put their money where their mouth is. Exactly what Simone says, honestly, and especially during like the tumultuous time that we're in now. I had a lot of friends over the summer asking me because of the BLM movement. They're like, "Are you okay? Are you right?" I'm like, "I'm fine," but you should definitely reach out to people that are like, kind of, walking the streets and kind of protesting. Find out if they need anything, like money. Like honestly, because that's the biggest way to support me. That's the most immediate way to support me. And so that's what I would say with regards to Bloomberg. I think cut the red tape and actually put money to these organizations that you are obviously using as face value to represent your company as diverse. And for IBM, they definitely need to require training to all departments, to all employees, because I think a lot of other employees get to skip that because they've been there for so long, because IBM is definitely a company where you can definitely have your whole career there, and a lot of higher ups get to skip over new initiatives, and I think they need to make it mandatory for everyone. So yeah, on period.
I definitely agree with all of y'all. I know a lot of my experience has been in the utility industry, and that's a very interesting industry as well to go into, depending upon where you are and where you live. So I definitely understand and agree with everything you all have said, which kind of leads into our next question. When you first went into the workforce, a lot of these students are either so there's some freshmen, so they're just coming into college and they're trying to navigate the college scene, or there's a lot of people that are also getting close to graduation that are going to be entering the workforce. There's also some students that are going to be entering the workforce in terms of internships. And I know for a lot of these students in here, I can speak for them. They don't necessarily know how to navigate that going into that being a part of oSTEM. When you first went into the workforce, did you take into account your ability to be authentic at work? If you did, how? If you didn't, do you wish you would have?
So I will start and completely date myself. So so I graduated in the 80s. So where there was not a lot of support. It was truly taboo to be gay. You were totally discriminated against in the workplace. So going to at the time my university was actually a Southern Baptist university. So of course that puts that in perspective, but is no longer associated with the Southern Baptist Convention, thank God. But moving to the workplace, you definitely almost hid who who you were. You were strictly a professional, and you kept your personal life and your work life totally separate, because I mean there was a lot of discrimination. Because there were absolutely no laws around protection for gay people in the workplace. And so over the years, it's totally became the total reverse, where it's not really an issue. But, for me, it's always be professional at work, do your job, but be yourself. You don't have to really hide who you are today at work like it was when I first started in the workplace. So
I'm gonna echo, Leonard, you said a lot of things that I think I experienced as well. I mean, I entered the workforce in the early 2000s, so things were changing. I mean, you had shows like Will and Grace, but even Sean Hayes, who played the gay character, he wasn't out in real life. So there were still a lot of barriers, and for me, my first company was a very small company. There were, I think, 6 or 7 people working there when I first started. And my immediate boss, he was very conservative. very religious. And there were a couple others like that in the office. Not as bad as him, but we got along. But it made it uncomfortable, and I wasn't out. I was still kind of questioning at the time, but that kind of put a barrier in place, and that lasted for a while. It wasn't until the owners of the company got wind of some of the things that were going on in my life, and they brought me into the office and said, "Don't worry, it will never be an issue. If anything comes up, we will take care of it." And that made me feel a lot more comfortable knowing that there was that level of support. I'd like to think that, nowadays, 15, almost 20 years later, that things have gotten better, but I think we all know that's not necessarily true. And I think that's still, for a lot of people, depending on what the environment of the office is like and some of their coworkers, it can still be a scary place. As much as, I try to encourage people to come out and be their authentic selves, it's tough. It is tough. And I think everyone just has to kind of make that personal decision on, when they feel that's the right time, and hope that over time, people in the office come around, get to know people better, and, have that level of support where you can be who you really are.
And I'll add, Jeff, and you probably experience this too, because, I went through the era where HIV became a disease and was an epidemic in this country. My year residency was strictly in HIV patients, and prior to having treatment, and I saw thousands of young men die from the consequences or the in HIV or full-blown AIDS. And so I think there was also a stigma around, if you were a gay male, you were a potential carrier of HIV, which caused a lot of people just to be taboo and not want to be around you. Even, when I was in the hospitals back in the day, I mean, it was hard to find nurses and people to even treat or take care of HIV patients because everybody was scared of, this disease at the time. So I think, there was the taboo of the gay plague, is what it was labeled as, that made a lot of people also discriminate against gay people.
So for my experience, I was barely out to my friends, let alone at work. So that wasn't something I looked into, but kind of over time. And I think the biggest barrier for me was kind of my own self insecurities of being fully authentic. Because as I slowly just open with my coworkers, it was like no big deal. It was like, oh, nothing changed kind of thing. Last Christmas, I brought my boyfriend to a work Christmas party. It was like no big deal after that fact kind of thing. So I was like, oh, okay. So why was I so concerned? And at Lockheed, we do have a pride organization there. Just recently joined kind of thing. So want to get more involved with that as well. But from what I've seen, it's been pretty good. I've been lucky enough that it hasn't been detrimental.
I was going to say, I did take, kind of how things would go with coming out potentially into account when I was looking for a job. I mean, let's be real, I came to job hunting with a lot of privilege. I had this fresh degree and everything. And I actually was working a postdoc at UCF while I was looking for jobs. So I had the ability to be a little bit picky. So I checked out, what are these companies' records as far as diversity, the companies I was applying at. What were the protections at that time in the state where I would be working, because a lot of these jobs were not in Florida, unfortunately. I'm in Delaware now. And so I looked at that, and when it came to actually talking about jobs, I asked about what the benefits package was, because at the time that I was job hunting in 2014, I actually was engaged. And so, I wanted to make sure that I would be able to get domestic partner benefits, because this was before marriage equality. As it turned out, we got married, and later that same month it passed, so it wasn't really an issue. But I pretty much decided that I would do as much vetting up front of the company as I could. And then when I got there, I would be me like a normal person. I didn't bring anything up. I waited for people to ask about it. And I came out on my first day when somebody asked about my ring. So sometimes it happens like that.
I think so. Like to add on to what Simone was saying, I definitely recognize the industry that I was in. I also grew up in New York, and so I also just have been fairly, what's the word, loud my whole life. And so I wasn't really considering hiding it, but I also have to recognize the privilege of like of looking for work in the time I was looking for work. Like it wasn't like it was in the 80s. And so I never considered having to really hide myself. Also, it could be on a level of arrogance and hard-headedness, because I was also very adamant about being gay. Like I remember my last interview with Bloomberg. One of the things multiple things that I mentioned I have oSTEM and the National Society of Black Engineers on my resume, and so I mentioned I'm very Black and gay. So tell me about your employee resource groups. I also mentioned how diversity and inclusion was something that was going to be in tandem with my career and something that I was going to be a part of in any company that I was at. So I was like, tell me about your initiatives. And so I definitely didn't consider really the repercussions of like being my authentic self at work in an environment that wasn't so friendly. But I mean, I definitely, now that I'm in the workforce, I definitely have met with some friction sometimes, and I'm like, oh, this is interesting. It's like when you read a textbook and you're like, these are the things that's going to happen in medical school, and you're like, no, it's not. And you go there and you're like, oh shit, it's really happening, and I read about this. That's exactly my experience with being authentic in the workplace and realizing, oh shit, you really can't be it still. And so, and here's another thing too. And I remember, so I think for the people who went to Out for Undergrad recently, this past few weeks ago, will remember this. I think someone mentioned it. And I'm going to paraphrase because I'm not going to try to butcher the quote, but I think with the new generation of workforce coming into fruition, right, you all have this power to kind of dictate how you'll be treated. And I think it's really important to recognize that and understand the boundaries that you'll take, and know yourself and know what you will and will not accept, especially for the first years that are on the group chat, and the second years and the third years. Y'all will be following behind seniors who will be leading the way in that like kind of revolution. I don't think it's something that we need to hope for. I think it's something that you need to recognize that you have the power to bring to fruition. So yes, long story short, I did not consider the ramifications of being loud and queer at the workforce.
And another thing, I think that, when people are starting to look at, they're getting out of college and starting to look at, possible jobs and possible career options, there are so many variables that, can be considered. You want something that is going to be challenging. You want something that's going to pay well. You want something that maybe, has a lot of opportunities and growth opportunities. So, when people are looking at jobs and, maybe going through the interview process, they're finding out that information. But I think one of the things that's really important is really trying to get a hold and figuring out what the culture is of the people and the teams that you're going to be working with. It's one thing to have a amazing, really high salary, but it is another thing to be working 8+ hours a day with people who may or may not judge you for who you are. So I think that's really important for people. If you're starting to think about careers and jobs, think about, the people you want to work with, and make sure that that's going to be compatible with who you are.
Just something to add there. I say it'd probably be exhausting as well. You're not able to solve problems or be as creative with not being your full true self as well, just because you're like having to put energy towards that, and you're like, why am I so exhausted sometimes? Like, oh, I'm putting this kind of, face for work, whenever it's like, just do it, and then you can be so much better at whatever you're doing, kind of thing.
No, you're right. I literally forget. Like we're all in the STEM industry. I forget how much mental ability,
Power.
mental power, but like mental anguish it is to not only do my job, but also be like, okay, wait a minute, I can't say I took Tommy out the other day, so I have to lie. So let me figure out a lie. You know what I mean? Like so much acrobatic exertion. That's the word.
I think that a lot of times you have to work on teams that are really collaborative. You know, like some people do more individual work, but a lot of people, at least part of their job, they do together with other people. And even if what you're working on is not related to that, like I am not making a gay gas chromatograph as much as I would love to, you know, it's not a thing we're doing. But, you know, I have to be able to, you know, bring my sense of comfort to the conversations that I'm having with my coworkers about, you know, some new, not explicitly gay, but, you know, not explicitly not gay either gas chromatograph that we're making. You know, I have to be able to communicate with them.
Yeah, I think everyone's reply here is really great, and I know everyone really appreciated. This was a great conversation for this question, and I can also relate to this a little bit from prior internship experience as well. I know my first internship in the utility industry, I didn't mention anything in terms of like personal matters, and then moving into the second internship that I'm at, I've been there for over a year, so I definitely have had time to warm up just because it is an internship, and I've been there for over a year. And when I went in, I know I didn't say anything in terms of personal life. I kind of kept it a little bit hidden backwards, even though my group that I work with is very diverse and very inclusive, specifically within my group. Maybe not the company as a whole publicly in terms of every day, you know, everything like that, but I do recognize my company's efforts, and for me, I know I kind of started with like a coworker that was the youngest in my group, and I was like, you know, you graduated 2 years ago, so I talked to him, and then you know he challenged me to put my feet where my mouth was. You know, I'm the president of this organization, and he challenged me to go out in the workforce and challenge my workforce. So it's even led me to like contacting HR and seeing which ways we can improve different things and stuff like that. So you are all like students out there, the holder of you know, kind of what Malcolm and everyone was saying. You know, you control how you you know, the incoming workforce. And y'all kind of also hit on this as well, but going into the next question, you know, how did you navigate, you know, the professional workforce, which you kind of hit on, but how have you combined your identity into your daily work that you perform?
You know, I haven't really. Well, usually when I walk in the room, you automatically know I'm Black, so it's kind of hard for me to like hide parts of my identity. So I'm just like, I mean, I guess maybe if I spoke with a little bit more bass in my voice, that would be. But I was like, no, my voice, the pitch is perfect. You're gonna enjoy listening to me speak, so I'm not gonna change that. So I don't think I even considered what that would look like. I couldn't like consider what that would look like. So I kind of just like was like, okay, well, I'm already here, so I might as well focus on something else. You know what I mean? But I will caveat that with whenever I do internships, I always inquire about the diversity and inclusion organizations or the employee resource groups, because I want to know how well a company is supporting communities that I'm a part of, or how well they're not, and then I want to drag them for it during the interview. Not like, oh, you need to do better, but just bringing up the question. I would ask, and they would say, oh, maybe like there are some companies that are like, oh yeah, we have like, you know, 2 gay people, 1 Black person. I'm like, okay, cool. What are you doing to retain this talent, and what are you doing to bring more people that don't look and sound like you into the organization? But again, I should preface this with, usually when I'm interviewing with these companies and they've already told me that there's no initiative for D&I work, I'm already slightly disinterested. So if I ask these other questions, I care a little bit less. And I should also preface this, like, I should probably not do that. But the questions I ask after, I'm more concerned with, is this going to be a place where I want to work? That's why I ask the harder hitting questions. And these questions are more important to me than their reaction to the question, which could result in me not getting, you know, whatever I'm interviewing for. But honestly, at that point, it's better that I did not get it, because why would I put myself in that situation to begin with? So yeah, period.
So for me, I think it's, being being older and also knowing that in order to change things, you've got to be part of the change, and you've got to get involved and be in leadership and be part of policy making. I think that's important. And that's my advice to you as graduates is, don't just sit in the chair, get in front of the room, and become part of the solution. Because, as someone who's seen the policies change over my work history, from going to where you would be fired if they knew you were gay, to now being part of an organization where there's an internal group that supports gay rights. I mean, it's a big, huge relief from, like you said, the burden at work, because you're not trying to be someone you're not at work while you're still trying to perform on your job. So I think, my true advice is, be part of the solution, be part of the policy making. And to do that, you've really got to be part of leadership. And, when you're looking at a company to go work for, like Jeff was talking about, if it's all heterosexual white men that's been there forever, that's kind of what the culture is going to be. And you have to look and see if you can change that or become part of the change.
Just putting on my come out with pride hat for a moment. We work a lot with different companies, whether they're small local businesses to certainly large corporations that want to get involved, in things like our parades and some of our other events. And, one of the criticisms, not necessarily of ours, but just of a lot of prides around the world in general, is that they're becoming, quote, too corporate. All that money is coming in, and, a lot of people just accuse some of these companies of, slapping rainbow color on their logo and then calling it a day. I'm not going to say that doesn't happen, but at least personally, from my perspective, one of the things that we do is, we're working with, when people talk to us, we want to make sure that, do you have an ERG? And if not, here are some resources or different things that you can look at. We want to make sure that, if someone wants to partner with us, that we're trying to partner with them too, and give them the resources that they and their employees will need. And one of the things that we look at, and this is really only applicable to large companies, but I encourage people to look at that if you're starting to look for jobs, is, the HRC, Human Rights Campaign Equality Index, is an annual report that they compile, features almost, I think, 1,000 companies now. And it's a report card. They look at so many different sets of criteria, and they reanalyze and add new criteria every year. So the last couple of years, they've added things like transgender policies, things like supplier diversity in their supply chain. So it gets tougher and tougher to get 100%. But from our perspective, most of the companies that we partner with are at a very high level, and we know that they're not just talking the talk, but they're walking the walk as well. So that is something I would really encourage people to look at. Things like that equality index. It's kind of gonna show who's actually committed to some of those different positive policies out there.
I was also just going to add, not only should you be looking at the HRC list, but also do your research and go to Reddit, go to Glassdoor, find out what the queer people in those communities are talking about too.
I think that part of it is kind of also anytime that you have an opportunity to stand up, then, when you're able and when you feel safe to do it, say, I am not a manager, I don't directly do hiring, but if my manager wants to hire somebody and asks, where are good places to put out our job posting? I can suggest some that are more interesting than just the same couple of places and might diversify that pool a little bit. And so it's all of these small opportunities that you have, even when you don't have a large opportunity. They really do add up over time. Because say my department specifically at my company could definitely be more diverse, but how do you add to that? You have to show people also, and it sucks that the onus is on you a little bit, but you have to show people that this is something that is bringing something to the table. Like, I'm here and I'm giving ideas that are not necessarily the same as all of your ideas, but they're interesting ideas to look at. And sometimes my idea works when your idea didn't. And that's always going to happen for anybody.
Thank you all for your response. So kind of moving into, we've discussed diversity, we've discussed the inclusion, we've discussed inclusion in the workforce. And I pulled this next question from one of our feedback forums because I know some students are curious about this, and I'm going to add on to this question. Also, feel free if you don't want to respond to this as well. But if you have experienced any discrimination, how did you deal with the workplace discrimination? And then also, kind of going on the second side of this question, even if you haven't, how do you, if you want to respond, how do you feel like you would navigate that situation? I know it's really situational, but
So I don't think I've ever, I don't think people have enough moxie to be explicitly problematic with me, but I think I definitely had a team lead who definitely didn't really, I was the only Black person on the team, and I don't know if he really saw the value in me being there, which was interesting. And so I think multiple times during my time there, he had asked me, do I even want to be here? Which I was like, the fuck? Did I not get able to play myself and put myself in the situation to be asked this question? And so I just thought that was really interesting because that was and so again, this is back to what I was saying about, looking at a textbook versus experiencing something in real life. This is the first time I had experienced something so egregiously blatantly just rude, but also just it felt like there was so much underlining that statement. And for the first month when I heard that, I was like, damn, maybe I should just leave the industry. And then I looked back at Malcolm, who was doing that. I was like, girl, relax, because it was a lot to deal with, and it was a lot of mental. What was the word we just said? Mental acrobatics. I can't remember the word that was in the group chat. Yeah, exertion. Thank you. Yes, Patricia. So just so much mental exertion. Also, just like anguish. I was like, can you imagine, your identity in this industry being challenged, like your existence rather, not your identity, your existence in this industry being challenged after you spent so much time and been put in so much debt, for someone to be like, maybe you don't belong here. I wish, what the fuck? No, I absolutely, after that month of going over things and thinking, did I do enough work? Did I give enough face value? Have I put in enough input? After going all over those things, I had to realize, one, I'm a bad bitch, but two, I actually do bring something to my workforce. I'm actually contributing in a positive way, and I have a specific expertise. And so for someone to just challenge that out of nowhere, I was like, oh, I don't think I'm in the wrong here. And that's when I realized that, everyone, it's easy to get a title of a leader or a team lead, but it's not really easy to be a leader. And on my exit from that company, that team lead had actually called me, and the conversation was just really weird, along the lines of it was just really a lot of backhanded compliments. And I was like, oh, this is really great, a great footnote for me in my life, because this moment really cements the fact that, one, I'm a pretty good indicator of character, but two, I know what I need. And if I know that early on, I shouldn't put myself in that situation for any longer. And that person was not the leader that I needed. So yes, period.
So for me, I think you have to look at it to see if it's just an individual that has an issue, or is it truly a company that has a culture that's not accepting of gay people. So I think you really have to take a step back and say, is this is really one person that has something against me or me as a gay person? or has the company culture changed that this is really not the right company for me? Because company cultures do change based on leadership. And you have to be very aware of that.
So for me, I would say been lucky enough where it hasn't happened or I haven't really noticed it. And I'll be honest, I don't know exactly what I would do if it did come up. Just having probably had like the awkward kind of social anxiety come up kind of thing. So I, yeah, to answer your question, I don't have an answer from my perspective because I haven't had to deal with it, thankfully.
I would almost argue, even though I don't think I've been, explicitly discriminated against, I'm going to go out on a limb and say that typically the reality is there is going to be discrimination, but likely it's going to be more ambiguous or even subconscious. We all have our biases. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. We all have our lived experiences. We all have, the good things and the bad things that make us who we are. The key is when, we're dealing with other individuals, I think a lot of it comes down to us. I mean, it's one thing, for a company to have policies and for a company to have edicts, but on a really close and personal level, that doesn't necessarily change other people's mindsets and people's thinking. The real change, the real thing that we're trying to make happen is that understanding between two people who have, sets of differences. So that interaction, that personal connection and trying to, just explain who we are and be our authentic selves, just changing, the heart and mind of one person at a time, that can sometimes truly be the most powerful action of all.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. I think that on kind of an organizational level, like that's what you want to push towards. And I definitely also agree, like you're more likely to encounter not really sort of this hot discrimination, more of like a cold discrimination where it's just sort of like, well, I'm uncomfortable with you and I won't tell you that, or, just sort of not necessarily thinking to extend opportunities maybe you would extend to somebody that you feel more in common with, which unfortunately is a big way that discrimination is perpetuated because it doesn't look like something on the surface. So actually I think affinity groups are a really good way if you're at a company that has them, or is at the size to have them, or even groups like oSTEM, are a good place to kind of get maybe some feedback on more like your specific situation. I also have been very lucky. I haven't really encountered a lot of kind of explicit prejudice, but I have had people be uncomfortable with me sometimes. And I think that the biggest thing that I've done there is to try and set up my career so that I'm not hinging on the approval of any given person. And that sounds easy. It's not. Um, it's hard to explain that, but I guess just to keep that in mind, to not let there only be one path forward for you, because if somebody is sort of cutting one off, then you're a strong person. You will find your own way and you will go this other way. And I think that having kind of that ability to regroup and come back at it is also something that other people who aren't doing that to you are going to admire.
Just to add, Simone, I love your response. I mean, I love all of the panelists' responses, but like your response, literally, first and foremost, hot and cold discrimination. That's really funny, and that's a really accurate way to describe it. But also, I think that's something that my mother always taught me. She always taught me like just. I think there was one day where I came home and I was upset because I was on the robotics team in high school and I didn't think that the team members liked me. And I'm used to being the only Black person in the room. But this time I really felt it. And I was like, oh, this is different. And so I told my mother, I don't think they really like me. Two things she told me. She said, one, whatever anyone thinks of you is none of your business. And I was like, no, lady, it's my business. It was late at night. So I was like, are you confused, mom? And no, she like, it made so much sense. Like, I don't need to concern myself with what other people think. And this leads into the next thing that she said, which was just like, do your best. And be even better, which just meant like work really aggressively, work very, very hard so that no one can really, control your career. Because if you're the best at what you do, regardless of how uncomfortable your personal life makes people feel, I think your work will speak for itself. And then the companies that want that talent and want you, and all of you will come to the surface. Does that make sense?
Yeah, thank you all for sharing your responses there. With that being said, we are going to, Ari is going to read off, I think we have at least 2 questions from the audience. Students, if you want, please put it in the chat or message Ari privately. He's going to read off a couple questions. I know we have, I think, 2 or 3 at the moment, and then we'll go from there. So.
All right. One that I think is really good, that I personally have a curiosity about is how have you guys navigated imposter syndrome if you felt it?
That is a good one. I definitely have felt that, especially when I came onto a team. It was 5 people and I was the newest one. And it's like, learn these things. And I'm like, okay. But I think the biggest thing for me was get a good handle on what are your deliverables. In your job, you're going to have something or other that is the thing that you're creating. What actually are the metrics for that? And try and get kind of on a wavelength with whoever is actually the important person there. So if it's your boss giving you work, if you have a project manager that you work for aside from your people manager, anything like that, kind of figure out what is it that they're actually looking for so that you can suit it to that. Because otherwise you spend a lot of time standing there trying to guess what they want. And when you're wrong and you put a lot of effort into something and it turns out not to be right, then you really feel like an imposter. And that's always going to happen to everybody sometimes. But I think the more that you can decrease the likelihood, the better.
Yeah. To add to that, yeah, definitely get feedback. Be okay to say you don't know. Don't like just go a completely opposite direction, like Simone said, and it's like, oh, okay. I spent all that time, and it's not anywhere near where they wanted.
Literally, just to echo literally what LG said, and what Simone said, like, this question makes me think of all the things that I've heard before, the very like, just believe in yourself and, remember that you can do this, which are all valid, by the way. Like, you're bad and you're like bad in a good way, not bad in a bad way. You're bad and you're in the role that you're in, or, we're also all engineers. So you're in the role that you're in, or the internship that you got isn't because some fluke, it was because you deserved it. But literally what Simone said, knowing your job, like knowing what's required of you, it will, like, game changer. And what LJ said about getting feedback. Listen, I have never been so honest. So I work at Bloomberg right now, but my background is computer science and like data engineering. It is not finance. So I've literally maybe 10 times a day I'll say, I don't know anything about finance, but I have a question. And so then I'll continue with the question. I'm always looking for feedback. And one of the ways, like most recently actually, that I've really learned how to combat imposter syndrome that I definitely face when I'm on the job market, and I always face when I'm on the job market, because rejection, hell of a drug, because that hurts all the time, no matter where it's coming from. But like, I think one of the things that grounded me was doing projects on the side, project that I cared about with regards to, coding, or with regards to like, data aggregation, stuff like that. Stuff that I could do on the side where I can be wrong and then, fix it and then get the right output or whatever I'm looking for. And it's such a confidence booster. It makes you feel like, wow, I'm that girl I knew I was. Like, I'm really good at this. You know what I mean? So that's one concrete way that I absolutely combat imposter syndrome.
think it's something that I've certainly felt quite often. One of my, I think, probably big regrets over the years is, sometimes, if I'm in a meeting or in a group setting, if I feel that maybe I'm the new person in the room or someone else has, significantly more experience than I am, that suddenly my opinions and what I have to say probably doesn't matter because likely they have the answers. And that's just something that, has been mentally internal for me for a long time. It wasn't really until a couple of years ago, and when it clicked. I was at a conference and went to this one session, and we were all gathered into a room. And the speaker, I forget her name, but she was amazing. She said, "Everyone who is at this table is here for a reason. You all have different viewpoints. You all have different experiences that you're bringing together. And if you're here, then I want to hear them." And I think that's important for everyone in this session, that you have that confidence that if you're, no matter where, if you're in a room, a meeting, a session, team, whatever, you're there for a reason and you're there to contribute. You have your own ideas, your own viewpoints. Maybe they're wrong, but chances are they're going to bring a new perspective that other people should hear. One of the things that, now that I'm more in a leadership role, especially with Come Out With Pride, I've been doing this for 5-6 years. I've learned from some of my predecessors, but when I see some of the new people join the team and volunteer, some of these ideas they're far out there, and they're things that I immediately first think, man, we can't do that. But you have to get past that point and say, you know what, maybe there is a better solution out there. What else can be considered? And I think leadership is really about going beyond what you know and feel, and going out and being adaptive to what others are trying to tell you. And it's just so important to listen and be open to all those different ideas. But really, everyone just have confidence that if you have a seat at the table, use it.
I guess for me, since I've been in my industry for 30 plus years now, imposter syndrome has been not something I've had in the last 20 years probably. So anyway, for me, it's more of I'm the go-to person. Everybody expects me to be the expert. But even at my role, I do value and like to hear the opinion of the newer people, especially the younger graduates that have come out of school recently, because clinically, I'm there, but from a business perspective, there's a lot of new talent out there that was not taught when I was in school. And so it's always good for me to learn from other people that are coming into the industry of what are they teaching today? What are the expectations? I mean, I know what my role is and what my expectations are, but how do I take the new knowledge coming into the industry and incorporate that so that we're all successful? Because in healthcare, as we know, it changes every day.
Can I comment on somebody's message from Christopher about representation for the anxious gaze in the back? For me, I have dealt with really like paralyzing anxiety and social anxiety. So being able to speak up now, having gone through therapy, trying to empower those that have that, and encouraging them, because you were kind of going through those struggles kind of thing. So it's going to take a little bit more work to speak up, that's for sure. Being even here, this is like kind of out of my comfort zone from a year ago, but I was like excited to be here kind of thing. So this is awesome.
We're happy to have you.
Yeah, I really appreciate you being so vulnerable as well, because I actually personally suffer from really bad social anxiety. So hearing that from someone, a professional, is very reassuring. Kind of flipping it on its head, we're going to go with another question. What would you say was a high point of being out in the workforce?
I mean, for me, I think that probably the high point is almost continual, because as it turned out, My wife ended up getting a job at the same company as me in a different department. So the fact that both of us can continue being ourselves and, you know, like we know each other's coworkers, we don't have cause to work on the same things because she does data management and I do, you know, more engineering type stuff. You know, but just, I guess, feeling like I can do these same things that my straight coworkers are doing and not have it be weird is a real high point. And I think that that's definitely something that is a combination of many factors, you know, so it's not going to be the case always for everybody, but kind of knowing your environment and choosing your environment when you have an opportunity to really can lead to you feeling like you don't have these things hanging over your head, you know, kind of that exertion that kept coming up in the chat.
Literally just to hop off of that. So Mel, literally every time, this exact that I think that is the highest point for me. Not have feeling like I can do what all of my other colleagues are doing, but without feeling like, you know, like an imposter or without feeling like half of myself is there. Like actually, it's crazy. The other day I was working in a project and I was actually getting stressed out, which never happens. But I was just like, ooh, yikes. And I didn't know how to bring that to the conversation. But my teammates were like, Malcolm, it's fine. We all don't know what we're doing. Please bring your frustration to us. And I was just like, ah! Like, yes, please let me be a fool because I don't know what I'm doing. But also, I'm working in an environment where like the work that we're doing is work that I can do. And I'm still, as you know, a young professional, I'm still coming into getting that confidence of being able to do the same thing that my coworkers are doing. And so I think that's the highlight, constantly growing in my career and realizing, you know, wow, I can do this and I'm good at it. You know what I mean?
So for me, my boyfriend, he works at L3Harris, which is also defense manufacturing. So being able to kind of share notes from there, and him interacting with my coworkers, I interact with with his coworkers. It's just like we can speak the same language kind of thing. So that's pretty great.
I mean, I guess for me, it's when I actually started dating again about 4 or 5 years ago, and my coworkers were all intrigued about my personal life, and it was like, you know, I had my first date again in life, obviously. So it was very interesting just to see, and even today, everybody asked me, you know, about, you know, my personal life and what's going on and how are things going. So it's just like normal family.
Yeah, I really don't have much to add. You know, it's just been great being able to take my husband to holiday parties or what have you, and just to feel that it's normal and, you know, not have that weight on my shoulders like I used to have way back when.
All right, everybody, we've got one more question I'm going to ask. How can we, as college students looking for an internship or a full-time position, ask them questions about how accepting the company is as far as our orientation or any LGBTQ rights without necessarily acting like them perceiving that we're pointing fingers at them? How in an interview can we navigate that?
This is a stunning question. And so I mentioned earlier how sometimes I drag companies. Now, you do not have to do that, but you can absolutely do it a lot softer. I'm just really aggressive sometimes because, you know, I care. So I think a really safe question is just to ask about, like, you know, the social environment of the company, like asking about ERGs or asking about employee resource groups or asking about resource groups. Like, I think that kind of masks what you're asking. And here's the thing, it's a great way to figure out if a company, you know, knows what you're talking about. Like if you ask, what are the employee resource groups like? They should start mentioning the different affinity groups that they have. If they, you know, if they're confused by it, give a clarification, because I used to always say affinity groups are employee resource groups, but a company like IBM, they referred to them as business something groups. And so they were confused by the question. But this is a great question to figure out if you are supported without outing yourself too. and it was a question. It was I'm sorry, I know a question. That way of asking was presented to me by the she's going to be leading O4U next year, Angie Gonzalez. I don't know if you know her, but complete juggernaut, like amazing. She's yeah. Okay, so someone knows her. Brilliant, and I thought it was just a brilliant way to just, and also she's in a different industry than I am, right? And I'm in tech. I can just be like gay, but I feel like in other industries it's a little bit older and it's a little bit still kind of chugging along and trying to catch up with the times. And I think this is a great way to ask that. So yes.
I would say don't have fear. You know, when you're trying to land a job and interview for a position, you have half of the power. You know, it's not just a company that's asking you all the questions about, and they're going to ask, you know, about your history and your, you know, what classes you took and all these other attributes. Those are going to come up, but it is also your responsibility and your ability to ask them all the questions about things that pertain to you. You know, they want you too. It's not just you wanting a job, but they want you for your talents. So leverage that. Know that, you know, you have value and you should be able to just, you know, ask open and honest questions, just like they're going to for you. And when that happens, if you find, and I think this is where maybe a little bit of that gut feeling comes in, if you're finding that, you know, there's uncomfortable responses, then you may want to consider other avenues.
But I agree with Jeff. I mean, it's your interview to interview them as much as they're interviewing you to make sure it's a good fit to work there. Also, do your homework from an internet perspective. You research the company, look at their HRC index. You know, LinkedIn's a wonderful tool to network with people that work there to ask questions that you're not going to be interviewing with. So there's a lot of methods or ways out there to navigate to find the information you want without having to be so direct during the interview.
I just wanted to add, like, I remember how desperate I was for like an internship or, a job like when I was in school. And so I really recognize how someone might be afraid to ask these questions and just take what they offer. But you have to really also recognize it's a quality of life kind of thing. Like, you need to not be putting yourself at a company that's going to make you stress, outside of what you're supposed to be doing so aggressively, and make you, question even being in the industry. And so it's really, like, I don't want to say that, yeah. And so it's very much so you have to, like, ask these questions or do the research just to make sure you're not putting yourself in a situation that's like going to make you regret being in that situation. And you're not losing anything either by asking these questions, because, when we're on the interview, we don't have anything yet. And they are absolutely also, as much as they're interviewing us, we're interviewing them. So like that, like Jeff is on the ball with that, like very much so. That is superpower. Like, I'm also interviewing you, sir, ma'am, company. So I'm asking these questions.
Thank you all for sharing your thoughts and opinions. We are kind of coming up close to time. So I want to kind of close out the panel. Do y'all have any final thoughts or anything you want to say before we go ahead and end everything?
I know there was a mention, Leonard, I think, had mentioned LinkedIn. If anybody wants to connect with me, my name is pretty weird. You can probably find me. I'm the Simone one. You might accidentally find my sister by accident, who also went to UCF. But so if any of you want to connect, you want to talk about chemistry, chemistry related to engineering or instruments, or anything having to do with being out in the workplace that you think that I could help with, I'm happy to talk all the time. Very chatty.
Yeah, and I echo that also.
Simone, I was literally going to say exactly that. I'm on like I thought Sean was gonna like say, do you have any like last 1 minute things? And I never do. I'm always talking. And so I was just gonna be like, listen, you right now are in front of a bunch of queer professionals, and it behooves you to like get in touch with us. Like grab our LinkedIn, you know, and like yeah, just get on LinkedIn. That's exactly what I was going to say. So I'm going to just put my LinkedIn in the group chat right now so you can just click it. Oh, it's not a link, huh? Thought it was going to be a hyperlink. Anyway, highlight that, and then you can find me on LinkedIn because, yes, I would love to connect and continue the conversation.
I think I'm going to leave with something. I think maybe just a piece of advice. And that's, you know, sometimes I think when we're looking for jobs or we're actually in a job, you know, we get kind of very laser focused on like, maybe this was a dream job, or you're very set on, you know, just, you're very comfortable sometimes. Be open, be welcoming to other possibilities, know that there are other possibilities out there. As someone who, you know, spent 10, 11 years at a company that started off great, but then just kind of went downhill for a while and my career wasn't going anywhere. Even though it was comfortable, there were other opportunities out there. And when I finally did make that jump, so much better. So just be open. And certainly nowadays, you know, I happen to get laid off earlier in the year. Things happen. But if you're confident in yourself and confident in your abilities, that's going to come through. Other opportunities are always going to be out there. Just don't stop looking for them.
Yeah, for me, I always say continue to challenge yourself. Don't get comfortable, like Jeff said. I mean, your industry will change during your career. You need to evolve with it, because if you don't, you will get left behind. And, you know, especially the way technology is changing today. So definitely always keep yourself challenged and, you know, and push yourself.
Yeah, just want to add there, utilize the resources that you have, such as this awesome organization, oSTEM. Also shout out to somebody mentioning Daring Greatly by Brene Brown, audiobooks, things like that. There's great things out there, even on just YouTube. So yeah.
Okay, well, with that being said, thank you all for attending. We really appreciate it. I know, I'm pretty sure most everyone in the audience definitely appreciates it. So it was great advice, and I mean, I'm kind of speechless. I was sitting here, and I like everyone passed by, and it's already 7:30, and I can't believe it's already 7:30. But we really appreciate it. I'm gonna go ahead and end the recording now.